Star Wars: The Heart of the Jedi by Kenneth C. Flint. Wait a minute, Luke said, maintaining his poise without a missed beat. Just what do you mean? I mean that you're the one who cut my arm off, Ponda Baba grated out through clenched teeth. In a fight, 4 years ago. And if I am? I've been waiting a long time to get even for that, the other said. You know how long it took me to learn to shoot with my left hand? Then I'd think you'd want to be careful not to lose that one too, Luke told him, the threat clear in his voice. Now, please, just back away. Why, you... Ponda bellowed in rage, yanking out his blaster. But before he could clear the holster, Luke had acted. He jerked up from his seat, driving his head hard into the other's face. Ponda grunted in pain and staggered backward, his metal claw coming free of Luke's arm. He hit a chair and toppled heavily to the floor. The Jedi was up in an instant, one head darting into his robe to seize the lightsaber's hilt. On Luke's other side, the mustached man sat frozen in shock. The Deveronian and tentacles likewise stayed put. But across the table, the fawn-like one made its own play. In a quick, agile move, it jumped up in its seat, one slender arm rising to lift an enormous axe into view above the tabletop. Doughy eyes gleaming cruelly, little mouth twisted in a snarl. It brought the weapon higher to strike. Luke's hand whipped the lightsaber free of the cloak. He switched it around and the bright blade flashed out. The axe swung up to sweep at Luke as he swung his glowing sword around toward it. The Jedi warrior's move was an instant faster. The blade's tip slammed against the center of the long axe handle, raising a shower of splinters as it sliced the wood through. The energy of the blade sizzled along the weapon and into the creature, slamming it back down into its seat, stunned. The metal-armed Ponda had now recovered and was starting to get up. Luke leapt away from the table to stand over him. The bright blade hung just inches above the shoulder of his good arm, clearly threatening. Do you still want to try it? Luke asked in a chill voice. The being looked from the glowing beam up to Luke's determined face. His hand released the blaster and it dropped to the floor. Good choice, said Luke. He kicked the weapon away and stepped past Ponda into an open area of the floor, pivoting slowly to face the other in the bar, swinging the lightsaber to keep any other prospective attackers at bay. Now, I intend to leave here with no more trouble, he told them. So if everyone will just... Hey there, you! A voice called from the main doors. He looked around it to see half a dozen stormtroopers rushing through the entranceway. The loud clicks from the blaster rifles told him their weapons were being powered up for action. He looked about him for an escape. At the back of the drinking hall, he spied an arched opening with kegs stacked at either side. He turned and rushed for it. The troopers started across the floor after him, roughly shoving patrons aside. Luke went through the archway, finding himself in a crammed storeroom. A narrow avenue through its piled crates and kegs led to a closed rear door. He moved to it. The metal panel was fitted with a bolt and a heavy padlock. He lifted the lightsaber and made a slash at the lock. The blade struck sparks from the metal and cut deep. But the lock stayed fastened. The first troopers reached the archway from the bar. But as one headed through it, the high stack of kegs at one side suddenly toppled. Some of them knocked him over. Some of them knocked him down, where two troopers tripped over him. Others rolled off, bowling two more men down. The little, nondescript, balding man who had shoved the kegs over quickly sidled away and slunk towards the front of the bar in the confusion he had caused. Meantime, Luke lifted his blade to strike the padlock. The one trooper still on his feet clambered over the struggling fellows and got through the door. Luke slashed down hard. The lock came free. He threw the bolt and wrenched the door open. The street lay beyond. The trooper raised his rifle and aimed. Luke leapt forward just as the man fired. The bolt exploded against the door jamb as he vanished through it, tearing a ragged hole. Outside, Luke was running, angling left to pelt at full speed back around the building to its front. He paused as he neared the front, peering past the last curve of the wall to the main doors. There were no troopers posted there, no one at all about except for the still waiting droid. Angry shouts from behind him prompted him to move on quickly again. He ran around past, then away from the saloon, shouting back to the droid. Come on, R2. Follow me. The little droid obeyed as well as it could, immediately rolling after him at top speed. Luke led it through the town marketplace and into the closest side street, staying well ahead of it as he sprinted down the narrow avenue and took a turn at the first crossroads. The droid rolled into the crossing, turned, but then stopped as its eye took in an empty street ahead. Nothing was visible there but the monotonous domed structures lining the way close on either side. R2 moved forward slowly, head swiveling, nervously, in search of its suddenly vanished master. It gave a little whimper of distress. From the rounded top of its head, the tiny sensor dish lifted on its extendable rod and began to rotate as the droid rolled slowly ahead. But when R2 passed a narrow, dark alley between two structures, two hands shot out to grab it and haul it back out of sight. It squealed in alarm, but then its head swiveled around, and it saw its assailant. It was Luke. The droid began to rock back and forth and squeak in its joy. "Quiet, R2," Luke said sharply, rapping it on the head. It went instantly still. Luke wearily peered out past it, around the corner into the street. There was no sign of stormtroopers. "Looks like we lost them for now, R2," he said. He looked ruefully at the still glowing lightsaber. Too bad they all saw this. He snapped it off and hung it back under his robe. "They'll probably be looking for me now. We'll have to get off Tatooine, fast. Come on." He stepped out into the street again and looked around. With R2 close behind, he moved down the next crossroads. Here he stopped to examine the symbols painted onto the walls at each corner. "I know the dealer we have to go to," Luke said as he considered the street signs. "A Vuvrian named Weoslia. I sold my land speeder to her. She's got all kinds of used ships. Cheap ones, too. If I can just figure directions from here." While he mused over this, the waiting R2 idly panned the scene. The lens stopped as it fell upon a most mangy, cat-like creature of mottled orange fur, sitting close by, staring at them. The droid beeped a questioning message to Luke. "Eh? What R2?" he said, looking around from the sign to watching the feline. "That? Just some stray, probably after a handout. Never mind it, I think I've got the way. Let's go." He started away up a cross street, the droid falling in beside him. It made another questioning series of noises as they went. "Yes, I think I'll have enough to buy something, R2, he replied. "If I do some sharp bargaining, that is. I didn't do as well as I hoped, but at least I doubled my money." It gave an incredulous whistle. "No, I didn't cheat for it," Luke said. "I told you I wouldn't, but if I had, you really shouldn't have minded, R2. Considering I bet you." A torrent of outraged tweets and squawks poured from it as they went on, fading away as they proceeded down the avenue. The scruffy orange cat sat waiting where it was, staring after them with bright green eyes until they were a safe distance ahead. Only then did it follow after them, slinking along from shadow to shadow, to stay well out of sight. But what about DDLC, the psychological horror? Okay, you've got a fair point, Snowball. A very fair point. I did really enjoy that, although you can't... That was a psychological horror. So it's different than kind of a more thriller horror. But still, I got to admit, it was fun to play. And I do need to get back to that and actually get the good ending. The Millennium Falcon and its escorting fighters came out of their lightspeed corridor within close proximity of a planet. Leia and Goen were up into the cockpit at once to peer curiously out over the heads of Han and Chewie as they flew in towards the bleak-looking gray-brown sphere. The details of it increased as they drew nearer, but that did little to alter a first impression of the world's dismalness. It seemed an utter, stark planet of rock, devoid of any sign of vegetation or water. Not even a dust storm disturbed the barren scene, nor the faintest wisps of an atmosphere obscured the view. The only feature breaking the monotonous waste was it seemed to be huge volcanic cones, thrusting up miles above the surface, widely scattered and irregularly spaced. "That?" Leia said in disbelief to Han. "You want us to meet there?" "You bet, Princess," he told her assuredly. "The planet Pelkadar. Best place possible." She shook her head in doubt. I don't know. I wish you'd told me something about it. Anything about it. Sorry, he said. Just your Senator Valadian and me. I transmitted the directions directly to him over his private channel. I figured the fewer who knew anything, the better. He agreed. All right, she also agreed grudgingly. That was probably wise, but at his responding smirk, she added sharply, just don't let it go to your head. I'll withhold my judgment until I see where this meeting's supposed to be. She looked out towards the planet again. I sure don't see any place down there for it. I don't see signs of any kind of life. I don't even see signs of any atmosphere. Yeah, that's what it looks like. Nothing readable from out here at all. A totally dead stone. That's the beauty of it. He grinned roguishly. Just stick with me. Have we got another choice? She asked. None at all. Better strap in. As they sat down in the rear seats and fastened the restraints, Han got on his comlink to contact Gold Flight Leader. Wedge, he said, we're going in now. Get your boys and just follow me. Oh, he added, and better keep 'em bunched up together good. Okay? Yeah, sure, Han, Wedge affirmed, but somewhat uncertainly. Right then, Han said to his passengers. Here we go! With that, he sent the Falcon into a sharp descent towards the surface. The 6 fighters pulled into tight formation and followed close. The surface seemed to come up rapidly as the ships fell toward it in full dive, and Solo showed no sign of slowing. What are you doing? Leia demanded. Just relax, Han advised calmly. Enjoy the ride. Wedge's voice came crackling from the comm speaker. Han, we're coming in kind of fast. Are you sure about this? Just trust me, Han told him. I'm afraid I can't, Goen said in a voice rising with growing alarm. He looked white-faced to Leia. Is he a madman? Han, you're going too fast, Leia said sternly. If you're pulling some childish kind of flyboy stunt, stop it. We could crash. You're going to kill us, Goen cried. Han laughed and just steered them on in. Where's your guts, Princey? He called back. The rock surface swelled to fill the view ahead as they plunged to meet it. Then, scant miles above the ground, with no time left to veer away, Solo altered their trajectory just slightly. Instead of smashing down, the Falcon dove into the open mouth atop one of the peaks, the fighters close behind. Darkness swallowed them. Han switched on the ship's forward landing lights, revealing a vertical tunnel, smooth-walled except for some faint, spiraling cuts. It's underground? Leia said to Han in disgust. Why didn't you just tell us? What fun would that have been? He replied. You enjoyed it, didn't you, Gao? Leia looked to Goen. The Prince of Galvoni III was panting, sweating, and extremely pale. It's all right, she soothed him. Han was only trying to scare us. He succeeded quite well, Goen gasped, shooting a hot glare at their pilot. I really ought to strike you for that one, Solo. Try any time, Han cheerfully offered. Then a point of light ahead, growing swiftly larger, caught his eye. Look out, we're coming to the end. Falcon and X-Wings shot out of the tunnel and into the open again. But this space, though quite vast, was still completely enclosed. He turned the ship to sail it horizontally between a ceiling and floor over 3 miles apart. They now flew in what looked to be a cavern of immense proportions. It stretched away in every direction as far as could be seen, vanishing behind the curved wall of distance, and the view was unbroken save for columns of stone themselves a mile thick, which thrust up here and there to support the ceiling. Even with the size, there was something about the place that made it seem other than nature-made. The surfaces above and below them were very smooth, marked only by shallow, crisscrossing grooves, as if created by enormous excavating tools, and the huge columns were formed in a rough oval shape, as if they'd been crudely hewn out. If the size of the place was astounding, its colors were more so. The floor and columns were mostly of gray rock, but the ceiling was composed of a quartz-like translucent stone. It was stripped through with sinuous streamers of warm pastels, looking like an aurora borealis frozen in ice. Where are we? Leia asked. Under the outer crust, said Han. 5 miles down. If this place is so hidden, the prince said with suspicion, just how do you know about it, Solo? Some smuggler buddies of mine found this place years ago, Han explained. Figured it was perfect. Invisible and unknown. Have you any friends who aren't outlaws? Gon asked nastily. Just you, Prince Boy, Solo returned. Anyway, they've set up an HQ here. Worked out of it for years. Then the Empire caught up with them. Wiped out most of their operation. The place was abandoned. C-3PO came into the cockpit, glancing about. Oh, have we arrived? He inquired disinterestedly. Glad you could join us, Han told him. Yeah, we're here. The droid looked out at the scene. Subterranean? Not very interesting, is it? He said in a bored way. I think it is, Leia said, obviously impressed. Where did it come from? Eaten out, I heard, Han said. Found some fossils. Big ones. Things like giant moles. I'm guessing these rocks release chemicals that make the air breathable in here, and things went tunneling all through these layers to get it. None of them around now, though. Must have died out centuries ago. That explains an atmosphere in here, but what about light? She asked, looking out into soft but sufficient illumination diffused evenly throughout space. Han shrugged. Ask the professor that one. I disapprove of your use of that nickname, the droid replied with a discernible, haughty way. Still, as you have deferred to my superior knowledge, I will explain. He put on a crisp, lecturing tone. The singular formation of silica-based substratum, which forms the layer above us, contains a high percentage of elements of an especially phosphoric variety. In such high concentration as we encounter here, this produces a substantive illuminating effect upon the cavernous area below. Say again? Said Solo, looking back to the droid. To place it on your level of comprehension, 3PO said disdainfully, the rocks glow. Irked by the tone, Han opened his mouth to reply, but a loud "Grant" from Chewie brought his attention back to the front window. There it is, he said, pointing ahead. The base. In the distance, a comparatively tiny huddle of buildings showed against the base of a roof pillar. Nearby, it was the smoothed-out circle of a landing pad. A single Lambda-class shuttlecraft sat there. Looks like your Imperial party beat us here, Han said. He got on the comlink. Wedge, why don't you take the boys out in a wide sweep around them? Be sure they're alone. The X-Wings obeyed, swinging out to scour the area far round while the Falcon circled the base at a safe distance. No one else we can see, Han, Wedge reported back. Okay, said Han. I'll take the Falcon in, but keep the boys flying, okay? Keep a good lookout. I still don't trust them. Right, Wedge acknowledged. Han glided the ship in. A reception party of the Imperials was visible, waiting by its own craft. As the Falcon settled to the ground in a last blast of repulsor lift power, this group strode forward, stopping midway between. Leia peered out towards the group of robed and sashed men. All the ones there look like senators, she said. No military around, and I'm fairly sure the silver-haired one is Senator Valadian. I'm still going out first to check, Han said. Come on, Chewie. As they started to get up, Leia rose as well. I'll go too. No, Han said firmly. You're ambassador now, remember? Too valuable to take chances. Stay put. He and the Wookiee moved to the cockpit door. No weapons, remember, Goen called after them. It's a peace mission. No weapons, Han repeated. Oh, sure. But outside the door, he paused to pull a small blaster from a locker and conceal it beneath the back of his vest. The two went onto the boarding ramp, and Chewie pushed the button to lower it. As they waited for it to drop, Leia came up to them. Come to kiss me goodbye? Han asked with sarcasm. Listen, you, she replied sharply. I just came after you to say, I don't know what you were pulling with that jealous stun. Jealous? He echoed in disbelief. Me? Yes, jealous, but making Goen look bad won't help anything. It's the galaxy's problems we're here to solve, not our own. So leave him alone, understood? Sure, Leia, whatever you say, Han agreed with a certain contriteness. I just hope he's got more nerve for the conference than he showed just now. He signaled to Chewie and they strode down the ramp to the ground. Leia watched him go, then went back to the cockpit. She arrived in time to see Man and Wookiee reaching the waiting party. She watched tensely as they met. Though he walked casually, hands at his sides and well away from the concealed weapon, Han scrutinized the group suspiciously on approach, clearly anticipating a trick. But the group of some 24 cloaked men, mostly elderly, made no overt move. The frail but distinguished one in the front raised a hand in greeting as the two came up. "Hello," he said in a soft but still powerful voice. "Are you Captain Solo?" Han nodded in acknowledgement. "And you're Senator Valadian?" "Correct. I am glad to meet you." He looked around him with open appreciation. "It's a very clever place you picked." "Thanks. I have a good idea now and then." "I dare say," the man said, eyeing him. "From the reports I've had of you, you're most shrewd. Tell me, is the Princess Leia with you? I haven't seen her since she was a girl." "You can come on board and meet her," Han offered, "if you don't mind coming alone." Valadian laughed. "Testing me, Captain Solo? Of course I'll come with you. You have my complete trust. Oh, and you needn't hide your weapon any longer, Captain. You'll have no need of it." Han looked surprised by that. "You're pretty shrewd yourself," he said. "I wouldn't have survived so long in the Empire without being so." The senator stepped forward and clapped a hand on his arm. "Come, my boy, let's visit the princess."